My wife thought she was hiding an affair. She didn't realize she was triggering a cybersecurity incident response. It started with a phone call at 1:42 p.m. She claimed she fainted at work and begged me not to come to the hospital. She said HR is handling it. To a normal husband, that sounds like stress. To me, an ex-military intelligence officer, that sounds like a cover story. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I went dark. I treated our home network like a crime scene, mirroring her phone and tracking her location history. What I found wasn't just infidelity. It was a pregnancy test belonging to her boss and a trail of corporate embezzlement. Most men get angry. I got even. Watch how I used digital forensics to dismantle her lover's career, protect my assets, and execute the coldest divorce in history. In my line of work, you learn to trust the silence only when you have verified the logs. I am a cybersecurity incident response lead, formerly military intelligence. My entire career has been built on the principle that catastrophe rarely announces itself with a scream. It arrives as a whisper. It arrives as a single, unflagged anomaly in a stream of clean data. You don't panic when the red light blinks. You freeze, you assess, and you prepare to contain the damage. I was sitting in my home office, the triple monitor setup glowing with the steady hum of network traffic analysis for a mid-size fintech client, when my personal phone vibrated against the mahogany desk. It was 1:15 p.m. on a Tuesday. The caller ID said Claire. My wife never calls at midday. She is a project manager at a logistics firm, organized, disciplined, bound by a calendar that runs tighter than a naval watch schedule. If she calls at 1,300 hours, it is either an emergency or an accident. I slid the unlock bar, expecting a pocket dial or a quick request to pick up dinner. Instead, I heard the sound of jagged breathing. Jason. Her voice was thin, trembling at a frequency I hadn't heard in our 7 years of marriage. I'm here, I said, my voice dropping instinctively into a command register, calm, low, stabilizing. What's the situation? Are you safe? I fainted at work, she stammered. I'm at a clinic downtown. The urgent care on 4th. I went down in the break room. I am on my way, I said, already standing up. My chair rolled back across the hardwood. My hand was already reaching for my keys and my wallet. This was the automatic response. Assess, deploy, assist. No. The word came out too sharp, too fast. It wasn't the plea of a woman in distress. It was the defensive snap of a sentry guarding a perimeter. No, Jason, please, don't come down here. I paused, my hand hovering over the keys. Claire, you lost consciousness. You are at a medical facility. I am your husband. I am coming to get you. It's fine, really, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper, as if she were shielding the receiver. It's just stress. Maybe anemia. I hadn't eaten lunch. HR is here. My boss sent someone to sit with me. It's handled. I just want to get an Uber and come home and sleep. Please. I look terrible and I don't want you to see me like this. Just let me come home. I stood in the silence of my office, the monitors humming behind me. In incident response, we call this a discrepancy. The data points didn't align. If you faint at work, you want safety. You want the person you trust most to extract you from the chaos. You do not ask for an Uber. You do not cite HR as a comfort factor. Okay, I said, keeping my tone perfectly flat. I will have the bed ready. Text me when you are in the car. Share your location. I will. Love you. Roger that, I said, but she had already hung up. I didn't go back to work. I sat in the leather chair and stared at the gray Seattle skyline through the window. My pulse was steady, 60 beats per minute, but my mind was beginning to spin up the threat hunting protocols. Stress, anemia, HR is handling it. It was a plausible cover story, but the delivery had been wrong. There was too much latency in her responses, too much urgency in her denial of my help. 2 hours later, the front door opened. I met her in the hallway. Claire looked pale, but not the kind of pale that comes from a medical crash. She looked hollowed out. Her eyes, usually a sharp, intelligent hazel, were darting around the room, avoiding direct contact with mine. She was clutching her purse against her stomach, a defensive posture I had seen in soldiers trying to hide a wound or a breach of protocol. I made tea, I said, watching her. Thanks, she breathed, kicking off her heels. She walked past me, creating a wide arc, ensuring our bodies didn't brush against each other. I just need to shower, wash the hospital smell off, then sleep. Did the doctor say what caused it? I asked. I wasn't interrogating her, I was baselining. I needed to see how she handled the direct query. Dehydration, she said, stopping at the foot of the stairs but not turning around. And exhaustion. They drew some blood, just to be sure, but they said I'm fine. She went upstairs. I listened to the water run. That evening, the house felt different. The atmosphere had shifted. It was heavy, pressurized, like the air before a thunderstorm when the barometric pressure drops. Claire came down in sweatpants and an oversized t-shirt, curled up on the sofa, and stared at the television without really seeing it. I sat in the armchair adjacent to her, a book in my lap that I wasn't reading. I was watching the asset. Her phone, an iPhone 15 Pro I had bought her for Christmas, was usually left on the kitchen counter or the coffee table, face up. Tonight, it was in her hand, knuckles white. Every few minutes, she would tap the screen, check a notification, and then immediately place it face down on her thigh. Then I saw the pattern. She received a text. The screen lit up. Instead of lifting the phone naturally, she angled it 45 degrees away from my line of sight. She typed a quick response, her thumbs moving with a frantic, staccato rhythm, and then locked the device. I watched her enter her passcode to check it again a minute later. 1, 2, 3, pause, 4, 5, 6. That was new. For 3 years, her muscle memory on that passcode had been a fluid, continuous motion. Now, there was a hesitation, a cognitive load. She had changed the code. In my world, when a user changes their credentials without a forced policy update, it usually means one of two things. They have been compromised, or they are hiding data. Is work blowing you up? I asked, testing the perimeter. She jumped, physically flinched. What? No, just checking emails? Making sure the team knows I'm out tomorrow. You fainted, Claire. The team can survive 24 hours without you. Put the phone away. I know. You're right. She forced a smile. It didn't reach her eyes. It was a mask, a gooey overlay on a corrupted operating system. I'm going to bed. She stood up, taking the phone with her. She didn't leave it to charge in the kitchen station like she had every night for 5 years. She took it into the bedroom. I stayed downstairs in the dark. The house was silent, but the noise in my head was deafening. I walked to the window and looked out at the streetlights reflecting on the wet pavement. A civilian would look at this situation and see a stressed wife, a medical scare, a bad day. They would offer soup and sympathy. They would trust the surface narrative because marriage is built on the assumption of trust. But I am not a civilian. I am a man trained to look for the things that don't belong. The refusal of my help, the vagueness of the diagnosis, the shift in digital behavior, the physical recoil from my presence. These were not symptoms of anemia. These were indicators of compromise. I felt a coldness start to spread from my stomach out to my extremities. It wasn't the heat of anger, it was the chill of clarity. My wife hadn't fainted because she was dehydrated. Something had happened today that she couldn't tell me, something that required a cover story, a witness from HR, and a locked phone. I wasn't looking at a sick spouse anymore. I was looking at an insider threat. I turned off the living room lights and stood in the darkness, listening to the house settle. My heart rate hadn't spiked. My breathing was slow, controlled, rhythmic. I didn't know the specifics yet. I didn't have the logs, but I knew the system status. The network was breached. And for the first time in my life, the threat was sleeping in my bed. For the next 48 hours, the house existed in a state of suspended animation. We were operating in what the military calls the gray zone, that ambiguous space between peace and conflict, where intentions are opaque and every movement is calculated. Claire was performing the role of the recovering patient, sleeping late, drinking herbal tea, keeping her conversations light and surface level. I was performing the role of the concerned husband, but my internal systems were running at full capacity, scanning for signatures of a threat I couldn't yet name. It was Friday afternoon. I was in the kitchen, making a pour-over coffee, the dark grounds blooming under the hot water. The rhythmic drip was the only sound in the house. Claire was in the living room, supposedly reading, but I knew she was staring at the wall. My phone sat on the granite counter. The screen lit up. No sound, just a single vibration. I glanced over. It wasn't a text from a contact. It was a notification from Instagram. Message request from Marissa Cole. The name hit me like a splash of liquid nitrogen. Cole. I knew the name. Not because I knew Marissa, but because Cole was the surname of the man who approved my wife's expense reports. Ethan Cole, the finance director. The man Claire had described for years as a harmless corporate climber and a useful mentor. I wiped my hands on a towel, deliberate and slow. I didn't open the message immediately. In cybersecurity, you treat unknown attachments as potential payloads. You assume they are weaponized until proven otherwise. I took a breath, unlocked the phone, and tapped the notification. There was no introductory text. No hello. No we need to talk. No softening of the blow. Marissa Cole was evidently not interested in diplomacy. She was interested in a kinetic strike. It was a single image, a screenshot from a secure medical portal. I zoomed in. The interface was standard healthcare UI, blue headers, gray text. Patient, Claire Reed. Date of service, Tuesday, 13:42 p.m. The exact time she had called me. Test type, HCG. Quantitative, paternity risk panel. Result, positive. Paternity index, 99.99%. Father, Ethan Cole. The world didn't spin. It didn't blur. It just stopped. For a focused nanosecond, the biological animal inside me took over. A physical shockwave detonated in my chest, expanding outward with enough force to crack my ribs. My hearing narrowed into a high-pitched whine, like the after-effect of a flashbang grenade. My blood turned into gasoline. I felt a primal, violent urge to roar, to smash the phone against the granite, to walk into the living room and tear the facade of our life down with my bare hands. It was the fight response, pure and unfiltered. Then the training kicked in. Years of conditioning drills in freezing rain, command centers during active breaches, the discipline of keeping your hands steady when the servers are melting down, slammed the emergency brakes on my emotions. Control, the voice in my head commanded. Stabilize. I forced air into my lungs. 4 seconds in. Hold for 4. 4 seconds out. I looked at the image again. The pain was still there, vast and crushing, but I pushed it behind a blast door. I couldn't afford to feel it right now. Emotion is noise. Emotion disrupts the signal. I needed to analyze the data. The timestamp matched the fainting spell perfectly. She hadn't fainted. She had received the news. She had panicked. She had likely called Ethan, and then, needing an extraction plan, she had called me. But she hadn't wanted me there because the evidence, the paperwork, the conversation with the doctor would have exposed the operation immediately. Marissa Cole. She must have had access to Ethan's accounts. She had been hunting too, and she had decided to share her findings. I looked up from the screen. Through the open archway of the kitchen, I could see the back of Claire's head resting on the sofa. She turned a page of her book. The gesture was so casual, so innocent. A cold realization settled over me, heavier than armor. The woman in that room wasn't my wife. The Claire I knew, the one I had vowed to protect, the one I had built a life with, didn't exist. She had been overwritten. What sat on that sofa was a hostile actor who had compromised my perimeter, extracted my trust, and was now incubating the consequences of her betrayal while lying to my face. She wasn't just cheating. She was carrying another man's child, a man she worked with, and she was planning to pass off this timeline as stress. I looked back at the phone. The message was still there, a digital smoking gun. If I walked in there now and screamed, I would lose. She would cry. She would gaslight. She would delete the evidence. She would claim the screenshot was faked. She would call Ethan, and they would align their stories. They would spin up a crisis management strategy that painted me as paranoid or abusive. No, you do not engage the enemy when you are emotional. You engage when you have superior firepower. I tapped the screen. Save image. I didn't just save it to the camera roll. I moved it immediately to a secure folder inside a Vault app, protected by a 16-character alphanumeric key. Then I uploaded a copy to an encrypted cloud drive that Claire didn't know existed. I created a hash of the file in my mind, verifying its integrity, ensuring it couldn't be lost or corrupted. I was establishing the chain of custody. This wasn't a marriage anymore. It was a case file, and I was the lead investigator. I poured the coffee into a mug. My hand was perfectly steady. The steam rose up, twisting in the air. I walked into the living room. "Coffee?" I asked. My voice was level. No tremolo, no anger. Just the flat, informative tone of a pilot announcing a cruising altitude. Claire looked up and smiled. It was a relieved smile, thinking the tension of the last few days was fading. "Oh, thank you, honey. You're the best." She took the mug from my hand. Her fingers brushed mine. Her skin was warm. I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt absolutely nothing. The heat was gone. The love was gone. All that remained was the cold, hard logic of the mission. I was deep behind enemy lines, and my only objective now was extraction. I smiled back, a tight, mechanical expression that didn't reach my eyes. "Drink up," I said softly. "You need your strength." I turned and walked back toward my office, leaving her comfortable in the lie she thought she controlled. That was the moment I stopped protecting her. The most dangerous time in any cyber attack is the dwell time, the period between the initial breach and its discovery. In the corporate world, attackers can live inside a network for months, moving laterally, escalating privileges, and exfiltrating data, while the security operations center stares at green lights. My marriage had a dwell time of 6 months. I knew this because I was currently staring at the logs, and the timestamps didn't lie. It was 0200 hours. The house was a tomb. Upstairs, Claire was sleeping, likely exhausted from the biological toll of the pregnancy and the psychological toll of maintaining her cover story. Downstairs, I was operating in a cold, silent fury. My office was dark, lit only by the spectral blue glow of my monitors. I wasn't a husband anymore. I was a forensic analyst conducting a post-mortem on a living subject. I started with the infrastructure I controlled. Like many American families, our digital lives were merged. We shared a wireless plan, a cloud storage family tier, and a password manager. For years, I had administered these systems to keep her safe, enforcing complex passwords, setting up two-factor authentication, monitoring for identity theft. I was the sysadmin of our life. Now I use those administrative privileges to audit the user. I pulled the carrier logs first. Verizon provides a detailed breakdown of data usage, call duration, and SMS timestamps. I didn't need the content of the text yet. I just needed the metadata. Metadata is the footprint of the soul. It tells you where the attention is going. I filtered the log for the last 90 days and cross-referenced it with the number associated with Ethan Cole from the screenshot Marissa had sent. The results cascaded down the screen in a sickening waterfall of data. There were hundreds of entries. Calls made during her morning commute. Texts sent at 11:30 p.m. while I was brushing my teeth in the bathroom next to our bedroom. Long voice sessions during her lunch breaks. The frequency increased exponentially over the last 8 weeks, the escalation phase of the operation. I opened a separate window for geospatial analysis. I accessed the location history from the cloud backup. Most people don't realize that their devices are constantly pinging towers and Wi-Fi access points, building a map of their life to improve service. I overlaid her location data with her calendar invites. The discrepancies were glaring, like red flares in a night sky. Calendar, late strategy meeting, office. Location data, the Rittenhouse Hotel, downtown. Duration, 3 hours, 12 minutes. Calendar, team dinner. Location data, residential address in North Hills. I ran a property tax search. The owner, Ethan J. Cole. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the keyboard. I felt a sensation that was almost like nausea, but colder. It was the feeling of seeing the architecture of a lie. Every time she had kissed me goodbye in the last 6 months, she had been en route to a crime scene. Every time she had come home and complained about being tired, it was because she had spent her energy on him. I began the preservation process. In forensics, if you don't secure the data, it doesn't exist. If Claire realized I knew, her first move would be the remote wipe. She would burn the digital evidence to save herself. I initiated a full backup of her device to a local, air-gapped hard drive, a drive physically disconnected from the internet. I exported the chat logs, the location history, and the call records. I hashed the files, generating a unique cryptographic fingerprint for each document. This meant that if I ever needed to use this in a legal setting, I could prove mathematically that the data hadn't been altered since the moment of extraction. I was building a chain of custody that no lawyer could break. Then I pivoted to the threat actor, Ethan Cole. I needed to understand the enemy's capabilities. I pulled his professional profile. He wasn't just a manager, he was the regional finance director. He controlled budgets, approvals, and compliance for the entire Pacific Northwest Division. I started digging into the financial intersection between them. I logged into our joint bank account and downloaded the last year of statements. I wasn't looking for what was there. I was looking for what was missing. Claire loves sushi. We used to go to a place on 2nd Avenue twice a month. For the last 4 months, there were 0 charges for sushi on our cards. Yet, I knew she had been eating it. She had mentioned it in passing. Or I had smelled the soy sauce on her breath when she came home late. Who paid? Ethan paid. But Ethan was a finance director. Men in his position rarely use their own money if they can help it. They use the company's money. They hide their affairs in the travel and entertainment budget. This changed the profile of the breach. This wasn't just infidelity. This was potential corporate malfeasance. Ethan was likely expensing his courtship of my wife. He was using shareholder money to destroy my marriage. That made him vulnerable in a way a simple lover wouldn't be. It gave me a lateral movement path from the bedroom to the boardroom. I sat back in my chair, the leather creaking in the silence. The dossier was growing. I had dates, times, locations, and a financial hypothesis. I had preserved it all in an encrypted container that Claire couldn't access even if she hired a team of experts. I looked at the ceiling, thinking of her sleeping upstairs. She thought she was safe. She thought the fainting lie had worked, that the stress excuse had bought her time to figure out her pregnancy dilemma. She was operating under the assumption of confidentiality. She didn't know that her admin had just audited the system. I felt a profound, icy detachment settle over me. The man who loved her was effectively dead, a casualty of the initial strike. The man sitting in the chair was an incident responder, and his only loyalty was to the integrity of the remaining assets. I closed the encrypted folder. The screen went black, leaving me in the dark. Tick-tock, I whispered to the empty room. The investigation was complete. Now it was time to prepare the response. In military operations, logistics win wars. You can have the best shooters and the most sophisticated intelligence, but if you run out of fuel or ammunition, you lose. In a divorce involving infidelity, money plays the same role. It is the fuel. It is the ammunition. And right now, my supply lines were exposed. I shifted my mindset from incident response to asset hardening. Monday morning, while Claire was at work maintaining her fragile performance of the recovering, stressed-out employee, I took the day off. I didn't stay home. I put on a suit, not for work, but for war. I drove to a branch of a bank where I had no prior relationship. I opened a new checking account and a high-yield savings account solely in my name. Then, I began the migration. I didn't drain our joint accounts that would trigger a hostile action alert in Claire's mind and could look bad to a judge later. Instead, I rerouted the tributaries. I changed my direct deposit. I stopped the automatic transfers to our shared savings. I froze my credit with all 3 bureaus to prevent any sudden debt accumulation. I contacted a forensic accountant and a family law attorney, paying their retainers from an old investment account Claire had forgotten about. I was building a financial firewall. It felt cold, walking through the mechanics of untangling a life that was supposed to be forever. Every signature on a new document felt like I was signing a demolition order for my own home. But I forced myself to remember the screenshot in the encrypted folder. I forced myself to remember the fainting lie. Sentimentality is a vulnerability. In a hostile takeover, you protect the equity. Once the defensive perimeter was established, I pivoted to offensive operations. I opened the secure communication channel I had established with Marissa. We had moved past the initial shock. Now, we were 2 operators coordinating a strike on a shared target. Marissa was no longer just the grieving wife. She was an intelligence asset. She had access to the one data set I lacked, Ethan's personal financial outflow and his physical absence schedule. I need his travel dates for the last 6 months, I typed into the encrypted chat, and cross-referenced them with any unexplained withdrawals or credit card charges. Marissa replied within minutes. Sending the file. He calls them client development trips. I pulled her data and overlaid it with the timeline I had built of Claire's movements. The picture that emerged was not just a map of an affair, it was a map of corporate theft. August 14th. Claire told me she had a logistics seminar in Portland. Ethan's calendar showed a regional vendor review in Portland. Marissa's credit card statements showed nothing. But, and this was the key, Ethan was a finance director. He didn't use his personal card. He used the corporate Amex. I dug deeper into the public records and the fragmented data Claire had carelessly synced to our shared cloud. I found a photo she had taken of a dinner, 2 plates of Wagyu beef, a bottle of Camus, a view of the Willamette River. She hadn't posted it, just saved it. The metadata gave me the time and location. I looked up the restaurant's menu. That dinner was easily $400. If Ethan paid for that with personal funds, it was just a date. But if he expensed it as a client dinner, it was fraud. He was effectively asking his shareholders to subsidize the seduction of my wife. I kept digging. I found the pattern repeated 4 times in the last quarter. Strategy offsites that were actually weekend getaways. Uber Black rides billed to cost centers that had nothing to do with Claire's department. Ethan was arrogant. He had been getting away with it for so long that he had stopped covering his tracks. He treated the company treasury like his personal piggy bank, assuming his rank would shield him from scrutiny. This was the leverage I needed. Adultery is a moral failing, and in many states, it doesn't impact the divorce settlement much. But embezzlement, misappropriation of funds, violation of fiduciary duty, that destroys careers. That voids severance packages. That triggers internal investigations that don't care about privacy. I sat in my car outside the bank, the engine idling, looking at the spreadsheet on my laptop. It was a dossier of destruction. I messaged Marissa. We have him. It's not just the affair. He's running expenses through the company. T&E fraud. Her reply was immediate. What do we do? Do I confront him? Negative. I typed back. If you confront him, he destroys the evidence. He shreds the receipts. He calls IT and has the logs wiped. We don't give him a warning. We give him a jagged pill. I outlined the plan. We wouldn't be the ones to pull the trigger. We would weaponize the system against him. We would package this evidence, the dates, the overlapping locations, the probable expense violations, and we would deliver it to the one entity Ethan feared more than his wife, the audit committee. It was a 0-day strategy. We would drop the exploit before he even knew the vulnerability existed. I closed the laptop. The sun was setting over the parking lot, casting long, distorted shadows across the asphalt. I felt a strange sense of calm. The anger was still there, a nuclear core burning deep inside, but it was contained within the lead walls of strategy. I wasn't just leaving a cheater. I was dismantling a corrupt network. I put the car in gear and drove home. I walked into the house, my face composed, my voice steady. Claire was on the couch, rubbing her stomach, looking up at me with those eyes that used to be my world. How was your day? She asked. Productive, I said, loosening my tie. I got a lot of planning done. She smiled, thinking I was talking about my job. She didn't know I was talking about her termination. The dual-track operation was live. My assets were hardened. The dossier was compiled. The trap was set. Now, all that remained was to lure them into the kill zone. Terrain dictates the outcome of the battle. You do not engage a hostile force on their ground where they have cover and support. You draw them into the open, into a kill box you have pre-sighted and calibrated. I chose Saturday evening, 1,900 hours. The house was quiet, the heavy Seattle rain drumming a steady, isolating rhythm against the glass. I had disconnected the Wi-Fi router 10 minutes prior, a subtle psychological tactic to cut off her external dopamine loops and force her to be present in the room. I sat in the living room, not on the couch, but in the single armchair facing it. On the coffee table, there was no clutter, just a single tablet, face down, and a manila folder. The environment was sterile, controlled. Claire came downstairs, dressed in loungewear, her hair tied back. She looked soft, unsuspecting. She saw me sitting there and paused. The atmosphere in the room was dense, pressurized. She felt it immediately, the shift from domestic comfort to something sharp and metallic. Jason, she asked, a frown touching her brow. Is everything okay? The Wi-Fi is down. Sit down, Claire, I said. I didn't yell. I didn't raise my voice. I used the tone I used during a critical severity incident call: flat, absolute, leaving no room for negotiation. She hesitated, her hand gripping the banister. You're scaring me. What's going on? Sit down. She moved slowly, crossing the room like she was walking on ice, and sat on the edge of the sofa. She pulled her knees together, a subconscious defensive posture. I want to talk about Tuesday, I began, my eyes locked on hers. The fainting spell. She blinked, relieved. She thought we were back to the medical narrative. Oh, I told you. I'm feeling better, the doctor said. Stop, I said. It was a command, not a request. I am going to give you one chance, one narrow window to respect the 7 years of history we have. Tell me exactly what happened on Tuesday at 13:42 p.m. Her eyes darted to the left, accessing the creative center of the brain, the tell of a liar constructing a fabrication. I was at the office, she stammered, her voice rising in pitch. I got dizzy. HR called an Uber. Jason, why are you doing this? You're acting like an interrogator. I am not an interrogator, I said, reaching for the tablet. I am an auditor, and your account has been flagged. I flipped the tablet over. The screen was set to maximum brightness. The image was high resolution. The medical portal screenshot. The positive pregnancy test. The paternity index. The name, Ethan Cole. Claire stared at the screen. The color drained from her face so fast it looked like a systemic failure of her circulatory system. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The air left the room. That's not. She tried to speak, but the cognitive dissonance was choking her. The timestamp matches your call, I said, my voice cutting through her panic like a scalpel. You didn't faint. You panicked. You called him. Then you called me to establish a cover story because you needed time to figure out how to integrate this anomaly into your life. She burst into tears. It was an explosive, messy release. Jason, please. It's not what it looks like. It was a mistake. One time, it just happened. Do not insult my intelligence, I said. I picked up the manila folder. Incidents happen. One time is an accident. What you have done is a campaign. I opened the folder and slid the photos across the table. The strategy offsite in Portland. The dinner receipts. The call logs showing hundreds of hours of communication. The timeline of her betrayal laid out in black and white. You have been running a parallel operation for 6 months, I said. You have compromised our marriage, our finances, and my trust. You didn't just sleep with him, Claire. You built a life with him on company time. She reached out, trying to grab my hand. He manipulated me. He's my boss. I was confused. I was under so much pressure. Jason, I love you. We can fix this. I'll get rid of it. I'll quit. Please, don't look at me like that. You're so cold. I am not cold, I corrected her. I am compromised, and I am executing the containment protocol. She was sobbing now, the ugly, desperate crying of someone who realizes the walls are closing in. She tried to reframe the narrative, to make herself the victim, to weaponize her emotions against my logic. It was a standard social engineering tactic. Appealed to empathy to bypass security controls, but my empathy was offline. This isn't a negotiation, I said, standing up. I have already moved my assets. I have retained counsel. The divorce filing is being drafted as we speak. I am not asking you to leave tonight, but you will move into the guest room. Tomorrow, you will figure out your own logistics. You can't do this, she screamed, her face blotchy and red. Over a mistake? We're married. We were married, I said. Now, we are opposing parties in a legal dispute. I walked to my desk in the corner of the room. My laptop was open, the screen glowing. A single email draft was waiting. What are you doing? She asked, her voice trembling with a new kind of fear. She saw the look in my eyes, the look of a man who is about to push the button. Ethan Cole is a liability, I said. He used corporate funds to finance this affair. That is not just immoral, it is actionable fraud. I have compiled the evidence, the receipts, the travel logs, the overlapping dates. Jason, no, she whispered, standing up, horror dawning on her. He'll lose his job. He'll lose everything. Everyone will know. That is the consequence of the breach, I said. Please, she begged, taking a step toward me. If you do that, you destroy me too. I work there. Everyone will see me as a co-conspirator. I finished for her. I looked at her one last time. I searched for any flicker of the woman I had married, but all I saw was a stranger who had smiled to my face while planning my obsolescence. There was no anger left, just the heavy, silent weight of the decision. You chose him, I said. I am just making sure you get to keep him. I pressed enter. The email. Subject: ethics violation and financial irregularities. Confidential vanished from the screen, sent directly to the board of directors, the chief compliance officer, and the external audit firm. The payload was delivered. The chain reaction had begun. I closed the laptop and walked out of the room, leaving her standing in the wreckage of her own choices, the sound of the rain the only thing filling the silence. In the corporate world, a high-level termination is a lot like a server decommission. It happens fast, it is executed by a specialized team, and once the connection is severed, the user is scrubbed from the directory instantly. The fallout began on Monday morning, 48 hours after I sent the dossier. I wasn't there to see it, but Marissa sent me the updates via our encrypted channel. She described it as a surgical strike. At 0900 hours, the external auditors arrived. At 0930, Ethan's access badge stopped working at the elevator. At 0945, corporate security and legal entered his office. They didn't ask him to explain the discrepancies in the travel and entertainment budget. They simply informed him that an investigation had uncovered gross misconduct and fiduciary negligence. He wasn't given a chance to spin the narrative. He was given a cardboard box and an escort to the parking garage. The power Ethan held, the title, the budget, the influence that had dazzled my wife evaporated in under an hour. He was no longer a finance director. He was a liability. He was radioactive. In the tight-knit world of executive finance, word spreads faster than a virus on an unpatched network. No one hires a CFO who treats the company treasury like a dating allowance. Claire came home that evening looking like a ghost. The reality distortion field she had been living in had finally collapsed. She wasn't the glowing, pregnant partner of a rising executive anymore. She was the junior employee implicated in a scandal, carrying the child of a man who was now unemployed and facing potential civil litigation for expense fraud. I was in the living room, surrounded by boxes. I wasn't waiting for an apology. I was executing the logistics of my departure. They fired him, she whispered, standing in the doorway. She looked shell-shocked. They escorted him out like a criminal. He committed fraud, Claire, I said, taping a box shut. The sound of the packing tape ripping was loud in the empty room. Corporate entities protect the asset. He became a risk. They patched the vulnerability. I might lose my job too, she said, her voice trembling. HR called me in. They asked about the dinners, the trips. They have records of everything. I know, I said. I sent them. She looked at me with a mixture of horror and realization. You destroyed us. You destroyed everything because your ego couldn't take it. I stood up and looked at her. For the first time in months, I felt absolutely weightless. The anger was gone. The jealousy was gone. All that remained was the clarity of the aftermath. I didn't destroy anything, I said calmly. I audited the books. You two spent the capital. I just balanced the ledger. The legal proceedings were swift. I didn't need to scream in court. My lawyer simply presented the folder to her lawyer. The timestamps, the paternity test, the evidence of financial entanglement. We offered an uncontested divorce. I kept my assets, my retirement, and the equity I had hardened before the confrontation. Claire got the debt she had accrued and the freedom she had claimed to want. Marissa played her hand perfectly. With Ethan unemployed and disgraced, she filed for divorce immediately. She took the house, the primary custody of their children, and a significant portion of his remaining liquid assets. She didn't do it out of spite. She did it for survival. She was the superior strategist. 3 weeks later, I stood in my new apartment. It was on the 20th floor of a building in downtown Seattle, overlooking the Sound. The aesthetic was minimalist, clean lines, gray tones, no clutter. It felt like a clean install of an operating system. No corrupted files, no hidden malware, no legacy code dragging down the performance. I poured a glass of water and stood by the floor-to-ceiling window. Down below, the city was moving cars, trailing lights like data packets in a fiber optic cable. I thought about Claire. She was likely back in her parents' house or trying to make it work with Ethan in a cramped rental, dealing with the crushing reality of a baby born into financial ruin and professional disgrace. I didn't wish them harm. I didn't wish them suffering. I simply didn't care. In incident response, we talk about recovery. It's the final phase of the cycle. You restore the systems, you patch the holes, and you bring the network back online. But the network is never exactly the same as it was before. It is harder, it is more paranoid, it checks every credential twice. I had lost the woman I loved. I had lost the future I thought I was building. There was a scar on the architecture of my life that would never fully heal. But looking at my reflection in the dark glass of the window, I saw a man who was intact. I hadn't begged. I hadn't broken. I hadn't let the chaos consume me. When the warning lights flashed, I had followed the protocol. I had protected the core. I took a sip of water. The silence in the apartment wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. It was the silence of a secure perimeter. I turned away from the window, ready to start the next shift. I didn't win her back. I won myself back. This investigation wasn't just about catching a cheater. It was about reclaiming the dignity that betrayal tries to steal from you. Jason didn't destroy Claire and Ethan out of spite. He simply allowed the truth to do the heavy lifting. Sometimes, the most humane thing you can do for yourself is to stop being the safety net for people who are actively cutting your ropes. Real healing begins when you stop asking, "Why did they do this?" and start saying, "I deserve better than this." It's a hard road, but walking it alone is better than walking it with an enemy disguised as a partner. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button. For secret lovers, we bring you the truth, no matter how much it hurts. Question for you. What was the specific moment you realized you had to walk away from a toxic situation? Let me know your story in the comments below and tell me which province or state you're watching from. I love seeing where our community is listening from. Don't forget to like, share, and click the video on your screen right now for our next investigation. Stay safe out there.